Alabama ready to trip on a trap game? We're going to get into that right here on the All-American Report. Let's hope not. He's Mike Johnson. I'm Mick Gillispie, and Mike, right out of the chute, this is the perfect trap game for Alabama to lose.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, and you and I have talked about this on this show and off the show. And I think that this is, Mick, this is the next step for Kalen DeBoer, right? This is the next kind of prove it to me thing. And not that Kalen DeBoer has to prove anything to Alabama, right? Or to Alabama fans and the university or the players or whatever it is. But so many times is Kalen DeBoer going to be compared to not only Nick Saban, but other great coaches that have had dynasties that have been in programs like Alabama, right? And what is the next step for Kalen DeBoer? Consistency, right? Playing to a standard. How many times have we heard that over the last 20 years? Play to a standard, not to your opponent. Right? It doesn't matter how good you can do. Right? If you're not doing the things right all the time, they will eventually jump up and bite you. So I think that this is kind of a thing where you look at it and you wonder if it's a trap game. And so many other teams throughout college football get tripped up by trap games. To me, the trap game, Mick, is what really sinks great programs, right? You have, I mean, let's look at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has playoff aspirations, right? But they get tripped up by Kentucky in a game last week they had no business losing. And to me, that's kind of been what Lane Kiffin has been over the years. That's kind of, to me, what Hugh Freeze has been throughout a lot of his tenure as head coach. And that's what separates great coaches from just above average coaches. So I think it's all on the line for Kalen DeBoer. I don't think Vanderbilt necessarily is the trap game, but you do have a couple of weeks where you have some of these games that may not be marquee the way that Georgia, Alabama, or Tennessee, Alabama, or some of these other matchups will be along the way. So can Bama continue to climb? We talk about how well they played in the first half last week and how nice Jalen Milroe looked. You fall off a little bit in the second half. You can't pick up the first downs. Can this team continue to climb, or do they go back to what they looked like against South Florida with the penalties and the turnovers and the inconsistencies? That's what Kalen DeBoer has in front of him, and I think that's what Bama fans and this team need to see this weekend.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And this isn't just a regular Vanderbilt team. I think a lot of Alabama fans feel like the Tide's just going to go in there and crush them. And that could happen. I mean, look, I'm not going to say it couldn't happen. But the bottom line is that you got a quarterback that won at Auburn last year when he was in New Mexico. And then a team that went to Missouri, who right now is a top 10 team and should have won the football game, lost in overtime. They've had 2 weeks. Oh, and then our former head coach goes on ESPN and basically says that it's the one place you don't have to worry about playing in the SEC. You talk about a guy that would have freaked the beep out if someone would have done that to him, and he does it to DeBoer. I'm sure DeBoer was like, great.
Yeah, and you know, I'll be honest with you, I disagree with him because I don't think you have to worry about the fans. Right, in Nashville. That's the thing, and I think that's what he was talking about. You don't have to worry about the fans, right? It's not like you're going to have to go on the silent cadence and the head bob and the clap and all that. You can kind of pick your poison when it comes to those kind of things. Whether or not you'll be able to communicate, That's fine. I know that's what Nick is talking about. Here's what you have a problem with, though. You're going to come away from all that pageantry last weekend and College Game Day and the atmosphere that has been raved about with the LED lights and all the music playing. Everybody's in town and you're playing the number 1 or number 2 or whatever it was team in the country. And all of a sudden you go up there to a stadium that may not be capacity, which it might because Vanderbilt's a little bit better this year than normal. But maybe it's not capacity, probably hot. You're going to be playing in the daylight. Can this team get woken up? All right, or does there have to be a point where somebody kicks them in the butt? One of the captains have to walk in the locker room at halftime and say, "Hey, we got to get going." Can they do that on their own, man? Can they be their own, fire starters? Can they be their own, guys that kind of get the engine cranked early? I think it's the mark of a good team and a team with good leadership, right? And I think we'll find out a lot about that leadership in terms of this weekend. So, look, I've been, the Falcons are playing the Buccaneers this week, and I've been focusing on the Eagles. Got the crap beat out of them by the Buccaneers last week. It's the first time the Eagles have played in daylight this year. You look at, the Eagles haven't, Jalen Hurts, when we focus on him, it's the same kind of thing with Bama. It's not that they haven't played in daylight, but it's just one of these games where it doesn't seem like, a lot of people are focusing on. That's going to all come back to leadership and making sure you focus. I've been in these sleepy games. We played at Vanderbilt maybe 2007, I think it was. I think Terry Grant was our running back.
I remember Terry.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. It's tough because you have to be your own motivator. You can't wait for, an extrinsic factor to get your blood going, right? And so I think that's the challenge in front of this team for sure this weekend.
Well, I mean, you bring up a great point, too. I mean, Alabama's played Vandy a lot over the years, and some of these games have not been easy. I mean, I know under Nick Saban, we really didn't have what I would call a scare against Vanderbilt. But, man, I'll tell you what, over the years, we certainly did. And it's early in the year. This is the worst time to play Vandy. They don't really have the depth that any other SEC school has. And, look, I've taken shots at them, not at the football program, but at the school for not investing in the football program. You know, like they're getting the same money that everybody else is getting, yet they just don't want to spend it on football. But I think that Clark Lee's a good coach. And then, you know, you talk about Diego, man. Diego Pavia can play, man. I mean, he's a good player.
Well, and I think the concerning part, if you're an Alabama fan, and I guess we need to get the X's and O's this, because I don't think this is just one of those games where you just show up and do it. You know, now you have better athletes. Absolutely. Should you dominate them in the trenches? Yes. Should Justice Haynes and Jam Miller rush for 500 yards? Absolutely. But this offense is going to give you some fits. Schematically, it's like the first time I remember looking at Vanderbilt thinking they were they were playing football in this century, because schematically they are absolutely there. And you got Diego Pavia, who's going to be taking the snaps at quarterback. You mentioned has had success at New Mexico State and now is at Vanderbilt. You're going to see these like single wing pistol formations, right, where the ball's going left, it's going right, it's going downhill. Diego Pavia is their leading rusher. I think he's got just shy of 300 yards rushing this year. And so that's scary. I think when you go back and look at South Florida and what they were able to do with a quarterback heavily involved in a running game, it kind of gave us issues, right? And I think they did a good job of doing the hurry up. I don't think you'll see them get to the line as quick at Vanderbilt, but when Vanderbilt looks at film and sees what South Florida did, I wouldn't rule it out, right? So you're going to have pistol formations and split zones and all this other stuff that is going to keep our defense off balance. And we still do have a lot of youth on defense. I know people forget that because, you know, they continue to play well, but you have to have those eyes that, you know, doesn't get sucked in by the eye candy. And that's exactly the way Vanderbilt is going to try to attack our defense.
Brought to you by MyBookie. Use the promo code NEXTROUND. Got my Next Round shirt on. Use the promo code NEXTROUND at mybookie.ag. And with that, yeah, I like your shirt too. You get double your initial deposit. So maybe you feel like Bama's going to cover. The spread's only like 22, right? So, I mean, that's not a huge spread. And Alabama's winning streak over these guys, I think, is 22 as well. Like the last time Bama lost to Vanderbilt was 1984. So it's been a hot minute, as a lot of you guys say, since Bama's lost to Vandy. But this is also not a team that the Tide plays every single year. Actually, it's a 23-game winning streak. But mybookie.ag, go take advantage of that now. Promo code NEXTROUND, and they'll double your initial deposit. And also, Cover Crimson. CoverCrimson.com. Been on there, cutting it up with the boys. You guys do the same thing. $1 to join. And then you get the Cover Crimson t-shirt free with your annual subscription. So take advantage of that as well. But I feel like this is an opportunity again for Kalen DeBoer to just keep proving all of us that, well, anyone that questions him that he's not going to be able to take the reins from Saban, wrong. Because right now he checks every box. So this is the next box. And I think you brought that up, being ready for these trap games. I love that they put rat traps around the facility and everything else. Doesn't look like the team's in bad shape as far as health goes, right? You mentioned it as a guy that played in these type of games before. And I guess, going back home to play South Carolina, it's not like you're playing Tennessee next week and you're looking ahead to that. But still, the fact that Vandy hung in there with Missouri, it gives you that little bit of, maybe this team could fight against Alabama. And, if Bama does one of those deals where they turn the ball over a lot, this one could be kind of scary. I've seen Vandy challenge Georgia over the years.
Yeah, I mean, Vanderbilt's one of those teams that they're going to play hard, right? And I think that Clark Lee has done a great job of that since he's been at Vanderbilt. He's always, the guys, I think it almost sounds ridiculous to look at Vandy and go, well, they're a really cerebral football team and they're going to play hard. but it's just the fact of the matter. That's what it is. It seems so stereotypical to look at Vanderbilt and just assume that they're gonna, do all the things right and just get out athleted. But I definitely think that's what you're dealing with. I mean, Cedric Alexander, the running back, has got home run capabilities, in my opinion. They've got a couple of playmakers at the wide receiver position, but you don't want to get into a situation where you make bad play after bad play after bad play, and then you're having to throw it a lot, and then all of a sudden there's a tipped ball that's an interception and goes back the other way. And remember, this is a team that started off the year beating Virginia Tech. Then they beat Alcorn State, and then obviously I think a lot of people focus on that Week 3 game against Georgia State. That Week 3 game against Georgia State, Mick, is exactly for Vanderbilt what I think this Vanderbilt game is for Alabama. Right? You're on the road against Georgia State, and you're playing in what most of us know as Turner Field, right? And it's just this random game, this one-off game that nobody's focusing on against a lesser opponent, and you get beat because they hang in there, and then with less than a minute left, one of their wide receivers goes and makes a play. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, Vanderbilt lost. That's kind of exactly what I think the blueprint would be for this weekend. Not that I think Bama's going to lose, but I think if you let Vanderbilt hang around long enough, they have better playmakers than they've had in the past. And what you don't want to happen is all of a sudden a tip ball, a one-on-one coverage, something like that, a broken tackle, and then you have an 80-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter that you look around and go, man, what just happened, right? So I just think that you can mention the Missouri game, and I think that's something you're always going to have to keep in your back pocket. And we'll, God knows we got them not too long from now too. I mean, we'll see Mizzou here in a few weeks. But, I just think it's one of those things where Vanderbilt is going to try to do everything correctly. And as Bama, you have to do all the things correctly as well. You can't have this sack, turnover, penalty kind of combo going on if you're actually going to fulfill what you think should happen up in Nashville this weekend.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Ted Turner. I've been watching the Vince McMahon Netflix documentary.
Is it any good? Because
it's great, dude. Like,
I'm a little bit weary of watching it because people I've talked to are like, there's just so many different stories going on in the documentary trying to find the truth. And the honest part about it is it doesn't sound like anybody really knows the truth. It's like
I'm not at the end yet, but they make fun of when WCW overtook WWF or WWE or whatever, back in the 90s. I lived that, man. So
I was a WCW guy. See, that's the thing. Like,
me too.
I grew up on Sting, Hollywood Hogan, the NWO. That was me, man. The Stone Cold and The Rock were cool, but I was the Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Razor. Yeah.
I'm at Alabama, and if you guys see when I'm at home in my studio, I've got my license plate on my Ford. I had a Ford Bronco. It was just killer in college, and you could take the top off, and it was just awesome. That thing's probably worth $25,000 right now, by the way, and I sold it for $1,000.
It wasn't white, was it?
No, it was green. No, it was forest green. It was badass. But my license plate was NWO4L for the Wolfpack, man, like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. But I watched that, and I'm like, man, Hollywood Hogan, those guys, man, I couldn't miss that WCW.
That was the best, dude. I used to go to Monday Nitro with my dad all the time.
Me too, man. Me too. Well, let's talk some SEC. Well, I got you on here. And this is an interesting race right now. I think that the Paul Feinbaums and the national media types wanted to reshuffle the deck, and they wanted to slide Alabama down. Even Nick Saban predicting that Bama wouldn't make the SEC title game, which could still happen. But I think they're not only going to win the SEC, I think they're going to win the national championship.
There you go. Now we're talking.
Oh, I mean, dude, look, the way that DeBoer coaches, the way that this offense attacks, and then utilizing the entire roster. And I am going to say that was a weakness, in my opinion, of Nick Saban. I've only covered him his entire time. I felt like he was old school when it came to putting these freshmen in the games. You know that. You really had to earn, unless you were like Julio, where you couldn't put him in, but it got to the point where a lot of these guys, you wouldn't see them. And then all of a sudden, either they're transferring or they finally get in at the end of the year. And the whole time you're like, man, we could have used that guy, further on. DeBoer's totally modern when it comes to that, where he's like, hey, you're in there. And Bakwe, you're playing. Brown, you're playing. Hey, you couldn't keep Hollywood off the field. I mean, this guy's a freak. But I love that they're developing that depth, and I think it's going to help them in this SEC race.
I agree with you. Let me kick back just a little bit, though. I think you almost have to do that nowadays, right? If a guy like Ryan Williams were to show up and he didn't play and he knew that he was good, he's probably going to find somewhere else to go, right? I mean, you almost have to do it. The players now have, they have so many other things going on in their corner. They have so many freedoms as players that we just didn't have 15 years ago. That they're able to kind of move around. They can, it's illegal, but they're literally being recruited like right now by other programs. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. So I think that Nick just took advantage of a situation of saying, well, we can give this kid time to develop. There's other good players in front of him. Let's just, sit him back. But I'm with you. I mean, I think it is a modern era of football. And I think that Kalen DeBoer kind of falls into that of saying, let's showcase these guys. I mean, in the secondary, it's absolutely necessary. But let's be honest, though, Mick, and there's other parts of the team where you get transfers in, and the guy that signed at those places take a little bit of a back seat as well. So it is. And it's nice to see, man, because I think there is just something there's an aggressiveness to the freshmen these days that you just didn't see in years past. And, I think that's a hat tip to them to come in ready to play. And it's not just, Ryan Williams. There's a number of other guys doing the same thing as well.
Well, it's great to see the rotation, too. And the coaches constantly talk about, hey, if you have a good week of practice, you're going to get in. I mean, think about all the sidelines that you stood on waiting for a chance to just put the uniform on and run into the game for 2 plays and not happening. It's good to see Gino Vandermark get a couple snaps. It's good to see Wilkin Formby back in there, even though he had the bad game against South Florida, because you're going to need these guys. But and I want to ask you this, as a guy that was, that played, you didn't play right away. Would you have liked to know that if you kicked ass in practice, that at least when your family's at the game, they're going to see you run on the field at least for a couple snaps?
You know what, too, and it's honestly, it's a hard thing to answer for me because I know how bad I needed a redshirt season, right? I mean, it was like, I think I came into Bama and I checked in. I think I weighed like 265. I just come off of high school baseball season, running polls and doing all that kind of stuff. And then like a month after graduation, or maybe not even that far, I'm moving to Tuscaloosa and I'm checking in. And I think Bobby Conley was my O-line coach at the time. I think I check in, I'm like 264. And he's kind of looking at me like, really? 264? You're 6'5" and you weigh 264. And my first like one-on-one was against Mark Anderson. I don't know if you remember him. Mark Anderson was an absolute freaking beast defensive end, played a few years in the NFL. I'm like 264. He probably weighed more than me at that point. Absolutely puts me on my back in my first one-on-one pass rush. I ran a triple option offense, a veer offense in high school, and I'm going, I don't even know how to get in a left-handed stance. So it's kind of a loaded question when you ask me, because I'm sitting there going, I needed that redshirt year. And now I think it is cool now because you know this as well as I do. You can play the 4 games and still redshirt. I think that rule is going to be gone very soon because of some of the guys that are taking advantage of it financially. You saw it at UNLV. A lot of other guys are going to kind of start holding programs hostage 4 games into the year if they don't do away with the redshirt season. But I needed it really bad. But to your point, there was nothing better than my actual redshirt freshman year. I was not a starter, but then I'm suiting up. I'm making all the road trips. I'm on like field goal team, and I'm able to at least get in the action, right? And there's something so awesome about that. But I wasn't a guy that thought I was going to show up and play right away. I was like, man, I got a lot of learning to do, and was able to do that. I think by the time I got 1 year in, I was like 296, 297. Playing tackle and guard, moving back and forth, and kind of learning that way. So it's just the guys that they're recruiting to Alabama. I wasn't that guy. I mean, right now, the way they're doing it with these number 1 recruiting classes and all that, it's just that's a luxury now that we just didn't have with Coach Shula and some of the things we were doing back then. So you needed development, but a lot of these guys, man, to your point, they're coming in ready to play, ready to rock, and they're hitting the ground running.
And you make them happy by throwing them in there, but you hope it doesn't hurt the team. All right, let's talk about this weekend slate of activity. You got Missouri at Texas A&M. I think this is a really interesting game because I'm a Mike Elko fan. I mean, I think the guy can really coach. I think he's underrated. Texas A&M's off to a quiet 4-1 start. You got Missouri at 4-0. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a believer. I don't think they're that good. I just don't think they're that good. And I think they're going to end up with some L's, and it could start this weekend.
I'm with you, man. When you look back at last weekend, you look at what Mike Elko and that defensive staff were able to do against Arkansas. I mean, it was pretty much a perfect defensive game plan, right? And you kind of roll it out. You play with the physicality that, I think a lot of people thought that Jimbo Fisher's teams would play with the physicality like that, and they didn't. And it seems like Mike Elko has kind of reawakened that, and they play SEC football the right way with big boys and big defensive tackles and disruption and everything else. So I think A&M is a little bit underrated just in the national scene. You weren't sure what you were going to get with Mike Elko year one. And to your point, I think Missouri's a little overrated. It's like, oh, man, they had a close scare against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt should have won that game. Let's just call it what it is. Missouri also played BC very close. I don't think BC is very good. A lot of people kind of made some stuff about that. So I'm with you in that one, man. I think when you look at what Mike Elko's doing and building in that direction, I think that he's a heck of a coach. I'm going to be honest. I'm glad that they're not on our schedule this year because I think they're a team they're going to sneak attack a couple of people along the way, man. So, it might start with Mizzou this weekend.
How about this one? The biggest moral victory of the season was Georgia's win over Alabama. Oh, I'm sorry, they didn't win. They play Auburn, who has had a couple of excruciating losses, including giving it away to Oklahoma last week. It's in Georgia. Mike, I'm going to tell you right now, looking at the spread on this football game, and I see that Georgia's a 24-point favorite, over-under is 52.5. I'm just weary of a team that lost that feels like they won.
Or on the flip side, like you said, a team that lost that feels like they should have won, and that's Auburn. You know what I mean? Like I think that both of these teams kind of coming off crushing defeats, and this is a rivalry game. It's the oldest rivalry in the SEC and everything else that goes along with it. I think Georgia's going to be happy to be back at home, to be honest with you. And I think that Auburn, it's just as well as they played last week, I'm still not sure this is a team with an identity. I think they have issues along the offensive line. I think their left guard he's hit or miss. I think you have a number of other pieces that you don't really know what you have from play to play, week to week. And to me, it starts at the head coach position. And I know that's easy to kind of pile jump on Hugh Freeze, but a lot is going to be made about making the right throw and making the right decisions at the quarterback spot. You look at like the last 10 minutes of that Auburn-Oklahoma game, I'm not sure the ball should have been in the air, period. I don't know that Oklahoma should have had the opportunity to return the touchdown. I mean, in a lot of ways, Mick, you look at Oklahoma and Auburn last week, Auburn would have been better off straight up kneeling on the ball the last 10 minutes of that game. They just would have, and then punting it. Instead, you got your head coach that's making these play calling decisions, and you throw a pick six, and then it's like, it still kind of comes back on the players. I don't like the way Hugh Freeze is going about his business right now. That's not a me knocking Hugh Freeze and saying he'll never work at Auburn or whatever it is. I just don't like the vibe that teams get off right now. This is almost one of those games where if you're a gambler, Mick, before you look at the line, you ask yourself what you think the line should be.
Right.
And then you adjust the way you gamble based on what the line actually is, because that Vegas probably knows what's going to happen in this game more than you do. Yeah. So if you look at it and go, man, I think Auburn will lose by 31, and then you see the line's 24, you should probably bet on Auburn. You know what I mean? Because it's going to correct itself. But this is a Georgia team that I think is going to be hungry. I think they're going to be happy. They're playing, that midday primetime kind of game. And they're going to be ready to get back on the path that leads to a championship. And that's a team that's not used to losing. But I'm with you. Auburn's going to show some fight, and I'll be locked in and plugged in. This is a team that we're going to be playing later in the year in Auburn, and personally, I hope they don't find an identity anytime soon.
No, it never hurts to watch them get just boat raced. How about this? Our old offensive coordinator, who you and I watched from we were in Atlanta when Bama played Washington, and we're like watching the offense, and we're like, what the F's going on here? And then he was gone after the game. I've never liked the guy since. I mean, I have respect for what he can do on the field, but typical Lane Kiffin game. Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Now they're going to South Carolina. They bring in the hype train, Jackson Dart throwing the ball all over the place. I mean, the guy's already got almost 2,000 yards passing on an 1,800 plus. And then South Carolina, kind of this sneaky, tough team. It's like a 9-point spread. Ole Miss is favorite. I just don't think Ole Miss is that good. I think they're Ole Miss. Just think they're Ole Miss. Like, they're good, They might win this game, but they're not. I don't think they go in there and blow them out. South Carolina should have beat LSU. They got a really, really, really suspiciously bad call on a pick six that they brought back.
Yeah.
One of those type of calls where you go, "Is this shit rigged?" And then now they got Ole Miss. So this is another really fun SEC game.
Well, and two, I think Lenore Sellers being injured definitely had some impact on the results for South Carolina this year, because I think he's a really good player. I think if you use him in the right way, he becomes extremely dynamic, and I think that he's somebody that can be explosive for South Carolina. On the flip side, I know that Coach Saban kind of mentioned this about Florida State and about the transfer portal. Ole Miss plays like a team to me that doesn't have a ton of passion for Ole Miss. And I mentioned that specifically when I look at the offensive line. They have talent on both sides of the line of scrimmage when you look at the line. And obviously a ton has been made about bringing in the D-line transfers. And it's been one of the things that Ole Miss has never been able to do before NIL is actually get defensive linemen across the board and offensive linemen. I mean, you've had good players here and there, the Mkemdichis of the world, Laramie Tunsil. You've had good players. Never players like across the board that seemed like were that good. You always had like the Greg Hardy or the Ray Jerry, and it just seems like now they have talent across the board. But here's the problem: all those guys we're talking about played with passion, right? They played with love of Ole Miss, and they played, because they love their team. I just look at this offensive line, and I look at particularly like the left side of the offensive line for Ole Miss. I don't think they play that passionately, and maybe that's. Maybe that's a circumstance, and maybe you look at, who the opponents have been in the past, but I just look at, what that group could be and what they're supposed to be. You have a very offensive line friendly head coach. He builds off of angles, and he does misdirection, and everything's built off play action. You're not going to just drop back and pass pro 50 times with Lane Kiffin, and they should be playing harder than they are. I really don't know what the key is, but I think that's something I'll be locked into this weekend as they take the field again is can they bounce back and start to play with that passion? Because don't get it wrong, Mick. This is a team in Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin that has their eyes set on going to the college football playoff because of what their schedule is. And so I think when you look at Lane, a lot has been made about Lane in Florida. If you start losing some of these games, I think that there's going to be some Florida fans that look at this and go, I don't think I want that. You know what I mean? So I'll be curious to see kind of how this roller coaster of a season goes on for Lane Kiffin. I mentioned it off the top. What does DeBoer need to do? Find consistency for your players. Lane Kiffin's a prime example, man. I don't think he's ever been able to do that as a head coach. There's always one or two where you're like, what are they doing? Mm-hmm. And it's because I think that they take on the attitude of their head coach. Yeah. They start believing the hype or looking on Twitter or whatever it is. They need to get back to the grind and start continuing to do the things that made them successful in the first place.
Right. He can't run from his character.
No, man. He is who he is.
He is who he is.
They are who we thought they were.
Yeah. His old school Tennessee is at Arkansas, and I'm telling you, man, this Tennessee is they're number 4 right now. They've got Nico rolling. Arkansas is one of these teams that's had the tough losses, but Green at quarterback to me isn't a good enough passer, but he's a good runner. I don't know, man. This could be a tough one though. Every time I think about that. What was it? The 98 season when Tennessee won the national championship and Sterner, like the quarterback from Arkansas, had him beat and he just fell over the football and Tennessee got it and beat him. So this is interesting to me. I don't think Arkansas is going to be able to beat them, but it wouldn't surprise me. And the line on this one's 13, Tennessee's favorite. Yeah.
And this is another, road game, for a very young quarterback in Nico Iamaleava, right? And I think when you look
wow, you nailed that.
You like that? Listen, man, I've been working on it. Right? There was a point in time where Tua was that band where I just started calling him Tua. I was like, I'm not going
to. Yeah, Nico.
It's a Nico Iamaleava. And look, man, I there's a reason why I have worked on his name, Mick, and that's because I think he's that good. Like he is extremely special in what he's able to do. I mean, to me right now, and I almost feel bad saying this because of how much I think of him. He's like a poor man's Jalen Milroe. It's like a young Jalen Milroe. The way he kind of attacks the game, the explosion he can bring with his legs, and the way he's able to throw the ball. So I have a lot of respect for Josh Heupel. I have a lot of respect for what Tennessee has going on right now in that program. On the flip side, I got to tell you, if there is one team I would have been down on going into the year, it would have probably been Arkansas. And I have to give a tip of the cap to Sam Pittman because he just strikes me as a guy, Mick, that doesn't like dealing with NIL and the portal and just wants to be a ball coach, right? And yet this team has played hard. They've played extremely hard this year. I hate to say it. I think a little bit of that credit goes to Bobby Petrino. And I think that, that's such a slippery slope and a sticky situation when it comes to that entire thing, because I went into the season going, at some point, they're going to have to let Sam Pittman go, and Bobby Petrino will probably be the interim, which is a mess. But they've played hard, man, and they have come into this century as far as the offense goes as well. And so I think it's a scary game for Tennessee. But I'll be honest, I don't think there's any way Tennessee loses this game. I think that this is an undefeated Tennessee team coming in a couple weeks to play Bama. And I think Tennessee's a playoff team. They've got a game against Bama and a game against Georgia left. I think that is a scary, scary matchup for anybody that's playing Tennessee because of the athleticism, because of the hypo system. So, yeah, I like Tennessee all the way in this one against Arkansas, but a small tip of the cap to Sam Pittman because I think that team is playing hard.
All right, last one is a really interesting game because it's UCF, right? With Auburn's former head coach over there, Gus Malzahn, against Florida. And can you believe this? Am I looking at this right? UCF is a 2.5-point favorite at Florida. I mean, that gives you an idea of where the Gators program is today.
This is a UCF team that, by the way, lost by 27 to Colorado last week at home. And so the fact that they are underdogs. I mean, I'm saying the fact that Florida's an underdog with the UCF coming in, and it's not like it's a far drive, right? We say home game. Right. It's like it's right there. It's not. We're not flying across the country like Colorado did. But I think my biggest question, Mick, for Florida right now is when does Billy Napier get fired? And I hate to say that, and I trust me, it makes me sick. Rob Sales, our offensive coordinator, you know that I've been friends with Rob. You've met Rob a number of times. Heck, Rob came and saw us at Rounders when we did the show when he was at Louisiana Lafayette with Billy Napier. Yeah. He shows up in town and comes and hangs out with us. Great dude. I love everything about that staff. I think that staff down there is a great group of men. I wholeheartedly believe that is a great group of men, but they're just not getting it done. And the bottom line is it just feels like it's a ticking time bomb to say when does it happen? Because the schedule, obviously, and it's been talked about till everybody's blue in the face, schedule doesn't get any easier. So when you look down that gauntlet they're going to be facing, we just talked about them playing Mississippi State a couple of weeks ago. They're underdogs to UCF. And then you start ripping off games against Tennessee, who we just talked about, it's great. Kentucky, who just won against Ole Miss. Georgia, who's probably going to beat the crap out of them. Then Texas, then LSU, then Ole Miss, and then who knows what will happen at Florida State. But their head coach isn't going anywhere. So it just it stinks to say, man. It really, really does stink to say. And you wonder, when that other shoe is going to drop on that program. But I'm rooting for Florida. I'll say that. I think that is a team that when they're good, it makes college football a lot more fun. I hate that they've kind of become the brunt of jokes, to be honest with you. But they're bad. They're bad, Mick. They're some of the worst tacklers that I've seen in the SEC in a long time. Them and Mississippi State both. I think Mississippi State's tackling is abysmal. But I think they have to find something. They have to find an identity, something they can hang their hat on. I just don't know if a Gus Malzahn team is the kind of team you say, well, we need to find our identity, because Gus Malzahn is going to hit you with a left hook out of nowhere at some point in this game, and you're going to have to bounce back off the mat. So I don't know, man. I just hope that Florida can find some kind of head of steam going into that next gauntlet of games. I just don't think it's going to be this weekend.
Really fun slate of SEC activity, and of course, Bama playing Vandy, and we talked about that. Mike, awesome job today. A lot of fun. Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you for hanging with us. MyBookie puts this show on, puts on the production here on this channel. Take advantage of the promo code next round. Double your initial deposit next round. Use that code at mybookie.ag. Then also, Cover Crimson. That's who we are right now. Like and subscribe, thumbs up, be part of what we're doing. Get in the comments section, talk about it. And covercrimson.com, $1 to join. Get on there. We'll chop it up on the message board. Clint's breaking down every single play, third downs, all that stuff, and more. And if you get the annual subscription, you get the Cover Crimson t-shirt. All right. Roll Tide, man. Have a great weekend.
Roll Tide.